Welcome to BEMA, everyone. My name is Jenna. I'm the Education and Community Engagement Lead here. Please take a moment and make sure that your phones are in silent mode. Yeah. We're thrilled to have Nikki McClure here with us today. There will be time for audience questions and answers at the end. There will also be a book signing afterward in our bistro. And everyone is welcome to stay until 5 o'clock when our reception and artist party starts for the evening too, for all the new exhibiting artists, including Nikki. We would like to begin with the words of Chief Seattle. Every part of this soil is sacred in the estimation of my people. Every hillside, every valley, every plain and grove has been hallowed by some sad or happy event in days long vanished. And let's now acknowledge that the land on which we gather is within the ancestral territory of the Suquamish people of clear salt water, the Suquamish. Expert fishermen, canoe builders, and basket weavers, the Suquamish, live in harmony with the lands and waterways along Washington's central Salish Sea, as they have for thousands of years. Here, the Suquamish live and protect the land and waters of their ancestors for future generations, as promised by the Point Elliott Treaty of 1855. Artist and author Nikki McClure's solo exhibition here at BEMA, Something About the Sky and Other Wonderings, features more than 70 of her original Papercut artworks. Please join me in welcoming her.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for making your way here. I'm just going to take my shoes off now. It's so good to be here, and I really wanted to be here. So I'm glad you all decided the same. I'm just going to read something that I wrote yesterday for you all, because this picture is called Drift, and this is from my calendar series, and this is the image for this month of this year for now. July 12th, 2024, Blake Island to Bainbridge Island. I drift. Raccoons roll over rocks as the tide creeps up, and I don't need to look at a clock to know that it is morning on this island. Islands are thought of as solitary, independent, but this island has stories tangled and torn and not fully mended. This place is not separate. It is part of a longer story than this one, the one of my pink toes feeling for a path free of barnacles up this beach. And we carry a boat that is light enough to make carrying a boat thinkable, to a place high amongst toppled tree roots, for this clear water will rise. The raccoons will disappear into the forest edge to nap and digest and plan their next found meal. And we will wander our legs and minds, pondering pioneer history and culture as entertainment or as an exchange or as economics, wondering what this forest really was, full of ancient trees. Before. We'll find some berries and then even more on trails too hilly for most. And we will walk and wonder together, lost in time on the edge of summer, these endless days of sun and shade. And we will get lost. No sign or map or pattern to guide, just crashing waves in the wind above to give direction. Up and down, red trail, blue trail, lost but not lost as the beach is all around. We'll stumble out from the forested shade to bright light and piles of hot driftwood. Water just touches the rocks. We cast off our shoes and dive in. Fingers tingle to the cold, the burning hot of a refreshing deep chill. We'd swim forever, but there is no forever. Summer is finite. There is only now. So we swim, now, and now, and now, and now again, until my wrists stop working and still I swim in this clear salt water. It's why I am here, this moment now. I swim into the last possibility, feeling the warm layer deepen as fathoms become inches, and I pop up, now only ankle deep. Then we wobble to the shady edge and look out on summer. The heat expands the distant horizon, stretches and distorts what we see, and we drift off into no thinking until the boat that brought us here so long ago begins to bob and would drift away if not tethered for this future need. The tide is high. It is July 12th, 2024, and it's time to sail to another island, itself complicated and entangled, to Bainbridge, to Suquamish's clear salt water. And I'm very thankful for being here today with all of you, on this island, under this sky, surrounded by these waters, to drift and wonder with each of you. Thank you.
So, Nikki, there are various paper cutting art and craft traditions. Chinese, Mexican, German, Japanese, among others. Could you speak to those of which that most speak to you?
Sure. When I started out, can you hear me okay? Is this amplified? Nice job, Cole, in the back. When I first started out doing, exploring paper cutting, I had no idea. I just felt like I invented the wheel, taking knife to paper, but it has been happening for a very, very long time by people all around the world because it's such a accessible media. Of course, you had to invent paper first, and also sharp objects. But it's explored by many people, and it's a craft all around the world. And so, after I started making and doing things like that, I started looking around, and of the styles of paper cutting, it's most aligned with a Japanese aesthetic or technique. And I find that interesting just because we're both on the ring of fire. And it's almost, I look across and I could see Japan, and they could look across and see me. And of course, being on the edge of the Pacific, we would make things somewhat similar. It just felt that's which of the paper cutting
like the kindred
tribe
arts.
I'm part of the Pacific.
Could you just briefly share with everyone who might not be familiar what the other paper cutting arts are like, kind of in contrast or style, and what it was about the Japanese that kind of resonated with your style? Just a little bit.
So a Japanese style, or at least when I see it, or the artists that I've been exposed to, will cut out the full figure, whereas a Chinese style is more a silhouette, or German is also silhouetted, Mexican also kind of more solid, Polish is layered colors and layers, more of collage. Jewish is a lot more, they kind of incorporate text a lot because they're used as documents as well. So of them all, but then when I look at my work, it isn't Japanese. Like it's of here or of me. So I invented my own wheel, a training wheel, small little wheel.
So your calendars, they go back to the 90s, and they're often, when we think of calendars, they're associated with planning, and yet it seems to be something more like a call to presence in your work with the calendars. So how do you perceive this kind of planning versus presence or grounding in the moment with your calendars?
Well, my calendars at first, which was 1998, so barely the late 90s, and I didn't make one in 99, so that one had where you could write on the dates, as well as the year 2000, but I just abandoned that because it was more, it's not for the planners, it's for the moment nowers. And it what I wanted was to look across the room and know what now was. What day is it? What day of the week is it? Okay. It is Saturday, July 13th. I can see that across the room. I'm grounded now. To say, as a calendar maker ever since then, I heartily support and endorse my calendars for planners. You can just write over them. Don't be scared. Just don't overcomplicate your lives so much that you need more room than what I have given you, which is barely any. So just, keep it simple. Or birthdays. But it's an interesting question because I hadn't really, it is a way of living that is contra to what we are being, what's being asked of us of how to live. So that's good. I'm glad I'm providing that service of a countercurrent to over planning every moment of your life.
So I read that as a child you were always reading books from the library, and that they tended to focus on nature in the Northeast and other places, and that you wanted to create art and books of your homeland and of the Pacific Northwest, what you saw and what you knew. And I was thinking about this kind of resonance with place, and I was wondering, do you see it as kind of like imprinted from your youth, or was it just a lucky coincidence that you so connected with this land and the sea around here?
Well, it is interesting, this awareness of land growing within me. And as a kid, I would read books, but I also really loved berries. And I would pick berries and eat berries. And I remember I had this great uncle who had those blueberry bushes that were just like, they were so tall. They felt like, I was little person. And the blueberry bushes felt like they could go to the ceiling right now. And they were full of blueberries. But in the books I was reading, there were all these low berries that you had to bend over to pick, and you could see the bear over there. Like my berries, you couldn't see a bear. And I'm referencing Blueberries for Sal. And so it's a really good book. And so I think the berries part, and then my mother was from Michigan, and there was this one type of berry that I always wanted to eat. And she said, no, those are poisonous. And then when I went to Evergreen State College, I studied natural history. And it was in the fall. I started school, and we went on a nature walk. And I said, I was handed a berry. Eat this. I was like, what? That one's poisonous. My mother told me that it was poisonous, but it was salal berry. And it was delicious. And when you squeeze them at the bottom, they open up into a beautiful flower. Just kind of give it a gentle squeeze. It kind of opens up, and then you eat it. And so I just ate. My hands were stained. My teeth were stained. And I just realized there was so much I didn't know about my home, and that my world was full of neighbors that I wanted to know. Grand fir, Douglas fir, western hemlock, Pacific yew, fine maple, big leaf maple, all those people that I was living with, and all the berries. I then became very good at berry identification. And I even, I spent a summer working in the woods in the North Cascades studying marble murrelets to get them listed as endangered. And I was the ground crew for the plant surveys, and I would identify all the different types of huckleberries. I got really good at that. It was the perfect job for me. Identify all the huckleberries in this circular radius around this tree. Definitely my kind of job. So the place came from that, being out there, outside in the world. But then place really took a deep dive once I started studying natural history at Evergreen State College, and started just learning the stories of all the things around me that I hadn't been able to see yet, because your parents are really important teachers to you. And my mother, she knew Michigan really well, but I wasn't in Michigan. I was growing up here. So I learned it.
Yeah, I guess I asked because I've kind of had like a semi-nomadic existence, and there's certain places where like all of the nature, I feel it like in my cells. I'm like, oh yeah, this is a good place for me. And then other places,
Yeah.
not so much. And
No, I
so
feel
just
really lucky.
Yeah.
I'm so glad she moved here. I think the swimming is much better in salt water than in lake water, even though they're great lakes. And there's just more islands here. It's just, it's really nice here. We got really good, pizza, and especially on Bainbridge, right? No, it's just a place, and how rooted I am. I knew that I wanted to go to Olympia for a long time. Once I was a punk rocker roaming the streets of Seattle, all the shows in Olympia sounded so much more interesting than the shows in Seattle. And finally, I went to Evergreen, and I just rooted deeply. I was like, this is it. I'm growing here. Yeah.
Let's talk about your new book, Something About the Sky. Could you please walk us through the process of how it came to be and then the process of making it?
Yeah, so Something About the Sky was just released in March, but it was a long process to get it to a book sitting right in Jenna's hand. I was asked, it was during, kind of, when was it? Was it fall of 2020, right? So things had happened in the world, and it was Orion Magazine, which is a magazine of art and culture and science, a lot of nature, writing and art. They asked me to illustrate an article, and the article was an excerpt that Rachel Carson had written. And they just sent me like, do you want to illustrate something by Rachel Carson? And I just wrote back, yes. Like, you need it in 1 hour? Yes, but... So I found that they sent me the text, and it was an excerpt from this piece of writing that she had done for a TV show that aired in 1956. And Rachel Carson had been asked to write something about the sky. And she had really been reticent about doing TV for a while. But then given that task, she's like, I could write something about the sky. And Nikki McClure will illustrate it someday? Sure. No. So it was for Omnibus TV, which was an educational TV show in the 50s for kids. So she wrote it, and it kind of just disappeared into the TV land of scripts and whatnot. And so this was an excerpt from it. And then I liked it so much, the excerpt. It was an excerpt of an excerpt, that I sent that excerpt to my editor and said, I want to make this into a kid's book. I think this writing is so strong and so, I don't know, just her sense of science. The science that kids are given right now is just a barrage of facts and just all over, like science books, there's like info on every corner and everything, and it's just kind of overwhelming. So this is more science where you wonder, and it's science of poetry, and it's science of being in the world and trying to understand it, not knowing it, but feeling it. So my editor loved it, and she went and got the transcript from the Yale Library, the Rachel Carson Archives. And we approached the estate and got permission. But then my editor, she's a bit of a Nancy Drew. She went to the television show and said, hey, I want to see this television show. And they're like, you can't make a book of that. That's ours. And Rachel Carson's estate said, no, it's ours. She never signed the print rights. And they argued back and forth for too long. Meanwhile, I made the whole book. So I was like, okay, you guys, you figure this out, because I am the one who's I'm alive. Those people are all dead. And they figured it out. And so the book was made. And I'm just really pleased. It's had a really great response. 4-star reviews, which is pretty good. And, so as far as the librarians, they love it. The Rachel Carson people, they're really happy. And I'm really happy. I feel like I got to make a science book in the type of science that I love. And her writing, like reading her writing, it's just, she has a distinct voice. And it still carries forth 50 years later, her strength of her voice. And then the process of making it, was like, how do you even make clouds? Like, I got this text, but now it's about the sky and clouds. And when I cut black paper, then what I cut that's white is a hole. You can poke your finger through it. But this, is a cloud. You can't poke your finger through a cloud. It's actually substance. It has form and it has weight. And to just make it be a hole isn't right. So, in some ways, the sky is the whole, the space. So I was like, how am I going to do this? And I kind of been experimenting with them, with Orion Magazine, painting papers and cutting it. And so I thought, I'll try that. So I just would paint. I painted sheet after sheet after sheet after sheet of paper with Sumi ink. And I tried different papers. And first I tried paper that it was like, this paper's bad. I didn't realize there was bad paper, but this paper's bad. And then I ordered a bunch of different Japanese papers from this Salish, which is in Brooklyn, from $1 a sheet to $50 a sheet. $1 sheet, bad. $12 sheet, that was good. I still have not touched the $50 sheet. Are you crazy? I'm trying to make it that. Books don't pay that much. And so I painted a bunch of $12 sheets of paper. And I would have to wait several days for it to dry. And I had this whole stack of them. And the paper also, I couldn't even draw on it. I just had to go with it with a knife. So I would look through these piles of paper, and I thought of them as a stack of possibility. And which one was going to be the picture? I didn't know. I just would have to search through and be like, oh, this one feels like it needs to be for this picture. And then I would just start cutting. And it was really remarkable experience. Because when I've been making pictures with black paper for, a long time, 1996. That's like, that's a long time. There's several rings around my tree. And I know what the paper's going to say. Like, I know the answer to my question. But this, I had no idea what the paper was going to say back. And it was like, wow, I've really hit COVID, pandemic, isolation, where I'm talking with paper and wondering what it's going to say back to me. And we had a wonderful time, me and the paper. And I also cut a picture of Rachel Carson up, so she was part of it. And I'd asked Rachel in the paper. And I only had one chance. And then that piece of paper, I could never replicate the painting of it ever again. And so it was total edge of disaster, which was the most fascinating place to be as an artist. And I really liked it. It was like riding a race car or standing on the edge of a cliff when you have vertigo, or, it wasn't scary. It was this exhilaration, first love. Kind of felt like that sometimes, like, just the unknown. And it was really fun. So that's the work that's in the first gallery, is that work from these painted papers and me and Rachel hanging out together. Yeah.
I'd love to read a quote from Rachel in the book and then kind of segue into another question about it. Without clouds, all water would remain forever in the sea, from which our early ancestors emerged more than 300 million years ago. Without clouds and rain, the continents would have remained barren and uninhabited, and perhaps life would never have evolved beyond the fishes. Want me to keep going? Yeah. And so I recently saw this National Geographic documentary called One Strange Rock. Have you seen that one?
No.
Okay. Well, the strange rock is our planet. And in it, I've got to get this right because I'm more artsy than sciencey, so I'm going to refer to my notes here. But basically, what it shared was like it was all about like the wonder and weirdness of Earth, and it said that we're used to understanding the water cycle of like ocean evaporating, creating clouds, and then raining down on the land, and that's the cycle that we're taught. This is the cycle that Rachel Carson speaks to in this book. But it turns out that in the series they spoke to how there's like this lesser known phenomenon of how desert sand and dust gets swept up in the wind and it mineralizes the ocean, which feeds all the phytoplankton, which is the basis of our whole food chain. So, and the clouds wouldn't rain down unless it had that dust in them to like weigh it down too. So I just thought it was really fascinating that the land feeds the sea too through the clouds, as well as the sea feeding the land through the clouds. I wanted to share that and get your thoughts on it. I just thought it was, I geeked out.
No, that's it's really, and in the book she talks about the ocean of air, and there's the ocean of water, and so there's these currents in the air, and the clouds can give you a sense of the wave patterns of the currents in the air, but it's all connected and affects each other.
It's like without the Sahara Desert, our ocean would starve.
It'd get very, very salty.
So is there anything else you wanted to share before we open it up to audience Q&A?
Just the picture that accompanied that. I'll just show it really quick because it is in the gallery there.
Wonderful. And if there's anything else you want to
This is the one, that we would not have evolved beyond the fishes. And these are sea wolves, which are up in Vancouver Island area. And once I got to go on a boat all the way up there and see them. And so I thought that, I don't know, just the sea wolves. But yeah, it'd be great to have some other questions and wonderings. What have you always wondered about?
So if anybody has a question, just raise your hand. I'll come
answer.
around with the microphone so that we can all hear.
Bonnie Becker's sister in the back has a question.
Okay, I'll get there. Let's start.
I'll start with a really easy one.
Okay.
And I could have always looked this up, I'm sure, but what month is your birthday?
Now,
July?
as in next week.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm July. I'm a Cancer.
I could have guessed that through your calendars, actually.
Really? You could have? You knew? Or you
It's
didn't
the
know?
most vibrant, always.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm a January, and I'm always jealous of the July. So.
Yeah, summer birthdays are always to be, yeah, it's pretty sweet. Except you never got the free book as a kid or the birthday party at school. Yeah, so there you go.
Any other questions?
I don't understand your technique. I can't figure out how you get from cutting paper to a print.
Cutting paper to a print. Well, what's out there is just cut paper. That's just paper out there.
Okay, but in the books, so they just...
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I cut paper. I take a piece of black paper. Thank you. Process is important. I take a piece of black paper and I draw on it usually, except for the colored ones for something about the sky. And then I me and my knife follow or make some path through that paper and cut it. And then from that, I scan it. And then I have a digital wizard. I won't tell you his name. He's very secret. He's an anarchist digital wizard. And he does all the computer stuff for me. And then when I see it, it's remarkably clean and beautiful. And he turns them into a vector file, which I'm still not quite sure what that is, except it can be really big. Like we could take this and make a giant. We could put this on the ferry boat on the side. Wouldn't that be cool? We could, and it would look really great. Or we can make it really, really tiny and make it an enamel pin, or I don't know, whatever, and that'd be fine. But the ferry boat would be cooler. And then it gets. I also at that time when I'm working with the digital wizard, we screen share from his lair in some secret hideaway, and he and I talk. I can see his screen, and we talk, and he adds the color digitally, and then it gets sent to a printer in Portland, Oregon, where it gets printed in the small family business, and then it gets put in a truck and goes a mile down the road to buy Olympia, which is not in Portland anymore because there's better food and more potential life partners in Portland than there are in Olympia. So, which they found, both of them. And then they send that around the world, the calendar, as a finished product. So that's that process. The books are, I scan it and also work with my wizard, and then that gets sent to the publisher. And then I work with an art director who is in this book. She was giving me a hard time over this last picture. Not, she wasn't. And I kept sending pictures to her. She's like, no, not that. No, not that. And I was like, oh, her cat walked across the screen because we're doing this. She's in Boston. And I was like, wait, hold your cat. And I took a picture of her holding her cat. And then I made it into a picture for the book. And I said, what about this picture? And she said, I love it. So this is Nancy with her cat Poppy. So for this book too, I didn't sketch. I just had to make. And I would send her pictures of the finished pieces and say, what about this? And she said yes to everyone. And eventually she said yes to this one. How did Poppy feel about it? I think Poppy's really happy. Yeah. Yeah?
No question.
Go through all that process, did you?
In the beginning, I think. Oh yeah, this is my Aunt Nancy from Michigan in the house, and she was in the beginning. My books were much simpler. So the beginning is apple, which is the little small square ones that are in the gallery with the colored in with crayon apple, and those. That's the third picture I ever made with a knife, and that I just made picture, and then what happens next? Then I'd make a picture. What happens next? I'd make the picture, and then I would go down to the copy store, and I'd make copies and then color in with red crayon because I couldn't afford, maybe even color copying hadn't been invented yet. I don't know. And so I just would color in with crayon because I felt I was cheap. And then I would bind it with a red ribbon, and I'd go to a bookstore and say, do you want to buy some books? And they say, sure. And then I use that money and pay for more copies and color in more things and make more books. And then maybe I'd splurge and buy myself a burrito or something with my earnings of $3. Yeah. You just have to start sometime. And, I feel like now everything, we have this expectation for everything to be perfect, Like what I read you, I just wrote last night. Thank you. But it was, it could use some honing and hacking and tweaking. But I wanted to share it with you because we don't share raw stuff anymore. Everything's so polished. So, but I think that there's a strength in that because everything's so polished now, that when you present something raw, it's even more powerful. So don't be afraid. Yeah, there's someone in the back.
Okay. Here, let me pass the mic.
Speaking of raw and unpolished, you spent time in Olympia when the Riot Girl scene was happening, and K Records and all that raw music, I think.
Yeah.
Does that inform your aesthetic and your art much?
Well, it's interesting because it's like, does it inform it? Or I was there. I'm not a card-carrying member of the Riot Girl Party, but I was there. And I performed, and I went on tour, and I stood on stage with a guitar totally out of tune, singing songs totally raw and personal, and probably very embarrassing, but I didn't know that or didn't care. And completely fearless until a certain point where I realized I could say more quietly, and I could say more safely by making art and pictures. So to me, my calendar is an album. And every year I make an album, and it's got 12 songs on it. So this is a song for July. And it could have been a song, like, I could make one up right now, but I'm not going to. Those days are a little bit behind me. But I would make up songs and like run down the alley, literally, and play between bands the song I just made up. So I don't think it influenced me because I was already there. And I think it still shines through me, parts of it, but I was something else also. I wasn't a riot girl. I was nature punk. And I wrote my own manifesto called Nature Punk Manifesto. But I was very much present and participant. And I still feel like it is Olympia was what nurtured all of that. And Olympia being capital, Olympia being Evergreen State College, Olympia being radical, Olympia being cheap, Olympia being small, all that nurtured a lot of really interesting things. And those, it's just, I don't know, where's the cheap place anymore? So we got to find some cheap places for the young radical kids to shake things up. Yeah.
I'll see if I can ask you loud enough. Can you hear me?
Well, it won't get recorded, so 1 second. Here we go.
Unless you want to be secret and not be recorded.
Thank you. I'm just looking at your work, and it looks so beautifully delicate to me. And I'm wondering, when those pieces are finished, they must be so. Must have to be so careful. Do they ever rip? Do you ever make a mistake?
Oh, all the time.
Do you glue and tape? How do you feel about sort of perfection and fixing things?
I don't tape. I don't glue. I make mistakes. And that's the fun part. And to me, mistakes, yeah. It's just wonderings and it's chances, and it's mistakes are liberating, because I trained my art training is I have no art training. I just drew insects for a whole week, and the same insect, and and looking at it and it's not perfect. It's all banged up. Bent hairs, and I'm trying to draw them the right length. It's just this ridiculous. So I kept cutting. I turned to cutting to reduce my perfection, my innate perfect being that I am. No, I make mistakes all the time. I make mistakes making cake. Oh my gosh, testify. How many times have I forgotten the sugar in cake? Yeah. And sometimes they're terrible mistakes for a kid's birthday party, but sometimes they're really interesting mistakes for the comic book party where I was for those who like it bitter, they loved it. But yeah, I'm delicate. I hold them up, and it's like lace. The stranger in Seattle came and interviewed me in my studio, and they're going to be airing a video of me, and I'm holding up some paper cuts so you can see them when they're not glued down, how I interact with them. And there's also videos of me, if you look up on YouTube. There was a PBS NewsHour also did a thing on me. So you could look it up and you'll see my studio and you can see the paper in its, while I'm manipulating and cutting it and making mistakes. She's going to bring you the mic.
How do you approach a blank page? What do you see when you do you sketch things first, or do you look at the page and see what you want to do for that day, or do you let the page move it, like that part of the process for you?
Well, for this work, for the calendar work, it's a blank 11 by 11 black piece of paper. So there's, in some ways, I have to have a plan already in place to really see. It's like a piece of square black paper doesn't really, you know. So there's little sketches. I start really tiny, little squares, and then make a two-size sketch that then, I used to redraw, but then I became a mother and time became less. So I would rub graphite on the back with like soft pencil, and then I did all these things, and my friend was like, "I have graphite tracing paper." So I slide a piece of, I was like, she saved like another hour of my life every, you know, it's like, that's a lot. And so I use that. But as far as like paper, this series with Something About the Sky was that experience where like, what's in here? What can I find in here? What is this paper showing me that I can bring out and add to? Yeah, did I answer it? Yeah. Yeah, sometimes, you know, it's when I'm doing the calendar, it's every week a square. And then I make it. Yeah. And when I'm working back and forth with my art director and sharing pictures, they're very tiny. I don't, the first book I made with them was all in a day, and I did big sketches, and it just took a lot of time to make the sketches, and then things changed, and now I just give them like a 1 by 2 inch sketch. Like, that's all you get from me. You have to say yes to it. And if you don't, I'll put your cat in it.
Any other questions?
Thanks. I noticed that you've added collage to your process in some of your newer pieces, and I was curious about that process and like what pieces are collaged.
It was interesting. Greg Bell, the curator here, he asked me that too, and I was like, "What is collage?" Even like, what is that? When you put one piece of paper with another piece of paper, that's collage. And so, I believe that they're marked which ones are collage and which ones are just one single sheet of paper. That said, in making this book, I want blue and black, but usually the blue would be, added digitally, like a color field, but it's actually, I had to cut out white from it too. So they had to be two pieces of paper, so a black layer and a blue layer. But then when I was cutting, I realized that there was more possibility within that. And so this picture, I had painted these papers, and I had kind of painted an area to be a moon or a sun. But the circle wasn't perfect, and didn't have that glow of light. And I slid a piece of cut paper underneath to accentuate it, because the paper is kind of translucent, or it has this, you can kind of, it's not solid and thick. You can see under it. And it gives it, like, seeing the work, it's been hanging around with me, and seeing it behind glass, it's like there's this luminosity to it of depth. It's like definitely the $12 sheet of paper. Now I'm like, I should have done the $50. Like, that would just been like gold leafing or something. So this paper, there's the top gray, there's a white underneath, there's this dark gray, and then there's these dark sandhill cranes. So that's how many pieces of paper went to make this one.
Do you have a dream project? Something that yeah, I know you're not a planner, you're in the now, but is there something that would be your dream to do? I mean, having Rachel Carson's words is really special. Or there's someone else's words you'd like to illustrate too?
Yeah. I really enjoyed doing this, and it made me think of other writers whose work might be just sort of in some file in an archive in a basement of a library somewhere to explore. But I don't know. I think it's just going to find me. And I also like working from my own text, so a lot of my work is what I write. And what is my dream? I mean, this was a dream project for me that I didn't know I had. So I think I'll just receive, see what happens. If you have one, you can present it to me. Yeah, it's interesting. Like sometimes illustrating is different than writing and illustrating, and yeah, it's just different processes and different. I mean, mostly you don't ever meet your writer or don't interact with a writer. That barrier or definition has been dissolved a lot by a lot of children's book writers and illustrators lately. But traditionally, it was you write, the illustrator illustrates, and then the two are mushed together and arranged marriage, kind of. Yeah. So who knows? Yeah.
I just wanted to ask if we could have a copy of what you wrote, because it's so beautiful.
Oh.
Is there a way that Bima could put it online? Or?
I will put it on my Substack, which is free. And it's part of the quill scene, but and I will put it on there, and then maybe the museum will have a link to that, and it's called the Quill Scene, or you can look up my name on Substack, and I post things. What is Substack? Substack is this interesting writing platform that people have really started to use, and you own all the copyright too. So there's that. It's really intuitive to put things on and share. And so what you would do is you would sign up, and it'd be an email that then you would be sent in your email, kind of a newsletter. And if at any time you want to cancel, just cancel. And I don't ask for any money or anything. It's just free, because I'm an anarchist nature punk. But yeah, I mean, if you want to take a photo of it, you can take a photo of it before you leave if you want. Because if that's too complicated, it might be too complicated. I just made that up. Now I have something to do on my calendar. God.
Hi.
Hi.
Do you have any advice for teachers and parents and other people who love children about reading this beautiful book to children, about what comes before or after or during?
Oh, you mean like how you would use this? Well, who wrote Here on a Ferry, by the way? I just wanted to know that. All right. So part of having the exhibit here was then transport back there in my mind, in my dream world of my dream project. There would be these clouds in the sky that have now not going to be here until September or something. And there would be these dynamic forces in the sky, and you would your perception would be open and receive and think of the sky in a new way. So some kind of like reading it and then lying down and just wondering about the sky. Let's think of questions about the sky. Let's, and let them get them starting to ask or get them to tell you why. Don't be the one to give all the reasons why. Let them have a moment, at least even in their mind, just a moment of wondering. Don't give them the answer. Have them wonder. And so I would do sky viewing. I would then look, maybe if you could do things in the water that mimic the sky, or try to understand the elements of the water that she talks about and how that would then be in the sky. So currents or waves or ripples, like how to, and this can be done in a puddle. It doesn't have to be done in the Salish Sea. It can be done in a bath, wherever. I would look into Rachel Carson's life. She was really important, and was really brave. Yeah, and just there's a history of feminism is in Rachel Carson's life too. So all that. Yeah. There's one more question. And he's right in the middle of this whole puzzle of people. And it is 4:00 now, by the way.
Thanks. I am wondering how much overlap there is between Nikki the artist and Nikki the friend. Like when Aunt Nancy has a birthday, do you write a piece or do you send an imperfect or raw piece of art? Or do you do you hold that back?
Sorry,
and it's
Nancy.
like, this is my art for my books and calendars, and that's where it lives, and it doesn't go beyond that world.
I sent her a calendar. And I sent her a book. God, you're making me feel bad, man. And yeah. And my mother-in-law won a picture of mine at a raffle. Oh, yeah, and I wrote her a postcard where I painted on it. I am a little, sometimes sorry, I'm so stingy with my relatives. But it is interesting. My work began out of that. I'm making, I'm giving, I'm making, I'm giving, I'm making, I'm giving. I want to make you this. I'm going to give it to you, because that feels so good. And then that making became giving to a much wider people, and that's why the calendars really become really important to me, is because I can make for 15,000 people rather than just one person. And it's also not just one art collector owning the original. It's everybody gets to have it in their kitchen and then do whatever, make it into jam jar lids or CD covers, if people even have that anymore. And then, whatever they wanted, cards and whatever they want to do with it afterwards. But I have been making some things lately. I made a really sweet picture for my friend Miriam for her birthday, which was last week. And yeah, little scraps of get out there. I also, I've been told, I don't want to brag, but I've been told I'm a good letter writer, but I also have been stingy about that. So I'm trying to write more letters because I like writing. So, I tried to do that in the quilt scene, but that hasn't really happened very much. Because once something becomes like you have to do it, then he's like, I don't want to do that, right? So, but still right now is still making and giving, but in a different scale of things.
Hi. I'm curious about maybe your process, but also your visioning. When you're swimming off the waters of Blake Island and it's beautiful, are you also thinking like, how do I capture this moment in your art? Or when you sit down to think of what your July month is going to be, are you thinking back to a certain memory? So how does your experience of the here and now show up in your art, and how does your art maybe rub off on your experience of the here and now?
Well, I think I'm fortunate in that my brain was composed before Instagram. So that need to capture and show is a little bit, takes more neural pathways than the live and do, reflect and make kind of. But at the same time, I really love taking quick photos of things and have been known to like, stop, you know. But that said, I also just try to just be, and then I'll recreate things later. So kind of stage shots where my husband, JT, will climb up a ladder and take a picture of me, you know, like, I want it from way up there, you know. It's like, okay. And, you know, it used to be like you'd have to wait an hour for photos to come back, right? Remember those days? And so now it's like I can see and like, no, go up to the very top of the ladder and take the picture, you know? So there's a bit of that. But I just try to be and then look back, you know. Now it's pretty amazing. You can just type in July, and every July you ever, well, not every July I've ever lived, but every July for the past 15 years pops up. And I can think, what do these have in common? Or what's the thing that I do every July? Or also there's a sense of time in making the calendar. What do I want to do in July? Or what do we need in July? Or what do we need, say, in November? Yeah. And make a picture in March of 2023 for November of 2024. So the bit of this like time travel, and often like I make a picture, not often, but many times I make a picture and like, I don't know why I'm making this. Actually, it's not really my favorite thing, but I run out of time. And I put it in, and then 12 months later, it's like, oh my God, how did I know this was going to happen? And sometimes it's not me. I get an email from someone, how did you know this was going to happen to me? And I'm like, I don't know. I just made the picture. So, you know, it's lived moment now. It's lived moment from the past, informing when I'm making. And then there's this possibility that's a total wild card, and projecting into the future how I want life to be or the world to be. So November of 2024 is called Connect. And it's a quilt of all these different painted papers. And some of them are kind of bloody even. And it's all these colors. And through patching together all the pieces, we are mending and becoming something beautiful. And it's called Connect.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Nikki.
Thank you all for being here.
And Nikki will be signing books out in the bistro in just a few minutes. Thank you, everyone.